Greetings, peace. One moment. Let's give honor to the source of the creator, the most high for making all this possible. I just got a deep revelation on something I'm experiencing or have experienced with someone. And this is gonna most likely be very triggering. Not really. It's gonna be it's gonna be very good. Very not even good or bad. Bring some balance to a lot of things structurally. It's wild because I was just talking to my therapist, and I feel like the beauty of being did I say, yeah, let's give honor to the source of the ancestors, known and unknown, for the highest good. Clap it up for yourself too. I brought something to her attention that was very insightful. And I feel like the fact of how we can learn from each other, like everybody, that's the thing about which I feel like we're coming out of those false foundations. When you look at control, manipulation, deception, and all those things sitting around, and confusion or things that are imbalanced, it will highlight the importance of this. When you have people who are supposedly looked towards as not just only the leaders, but the teachers, the people who can only bring in information, and that comes from not just spiritually, but on all levels, family structures, basically like this hierarchy. And with that is giving off like the false illusion of there being a source of everything, meaning like a source of things that literally reminds us that to be a student in everything, to be able to be to learn from even children. But when you have had things in place or people in position that get to the imbalance, basically the abuse of power, to have children and people be controlled and manipulated, or even placed in positions where they're not in their birthright of sovereignty, or sovereignty, because I'm not going to say freedom, because it's more than that, liberation and so forth. So I brought up something very important to her that people who ignore a lot, and this is what is whether people follow astrology or not, this is a lot of things are being highlighted right now. It may be different in your world, but a certain transit has happened, which is Neptune in Aries, I believe. And Neptune rules like what they say, dreams, illusions, and other things and so forth. Now, the reason why this is vital because it's been in Pisces. Pisces rules, I believe, also the waters, the emotional waters, the dream state, connecting us to things emotionally. And anytime you see emotions, that is ancestry, that is generation, because being born in water, from water holds memories. Most of our bodies are made up of water. And then how vital, how important it is for us that our emotions are a gateway to who we are, our character development, childhood development, and so forth. So when this is not a priority young, oh my gosh. When this is not a priority very young, the importance of having emotional stability. And then when you have the powers that ain't or used to be in a position where you have people who don't know the importance of emotional empathy, they won't care what happens to not only them, but they'll rise into ego and don't care what happens to children and mothers and so forth. As I was talking to the therapist, I was telling her, I was like, it's good that we could, learn from each other or mirror back to each other certain things and so forth. And I got along down the lines of expressing to her about those who subscribe to being white, Caucasian, and so forth. And I brought up a relationship. I brought up a relationship about, and I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. A lot of people in that realm of what they have been programmed to believe that white is right, their biggest conflict that will continue, that will have them continue looping through trauma is their inability to accept accountability. Because when you have pushed an image of white being right in all aspects and forms of life, then what you are telling a person or people that whatever they do, they can get away with and it's okay. And in that, what ends up happening is that they know no wrong. They see no wrong, or no one is holding them accountable. And this is where a lot of that violent behavior stems from, is because when you go on a deeper level of how people have misplaced how humanity at a point in time knew how to live amongst each other. And when you have imbalance again, why people project, build, create their identity around if white is only right, what ends up happening is, again, when someone comes and holds them accountable, let's say if someone's in an interracial connection, right? And if you have had a mother and father, grandmother build a foundation from a place of hatred, self-hatred, then again, that fuels them. That hatred for self basically fuels and enables foundation, not only for them, but for their children to build upon that. So what ends up happening is that, let's say you have a foundation of, I'm gonna use a term because white is considered additive, but a Caucasian or Siberian or whatever lighter shade people, to have built this cognitive disassociation, this is not disassociation, but basically I think that related to it, like cognitive dissonances from their neurotransmitters or things connecting to their memory, to what they've experienced, to basically their childhood. So what ends up happening is, and it's funny because I got something pulled up that can tie into this. My therapist was telling me about, because she's more educated in that field. I'm grateful that I can get more insight with her. Because I'm not what y'all call a professional in the world of psychology or to do anything. And, no, I learned from people. It didn't, I expressed to her in learning who I am from experience, going through emotions and going into depth about things. I naturally, as you can call it, an empath, can pick up on things that, as you see the world shift, is more from a perspective of divine insight. You can call it that. You can just call it whatever you want. That is just a natural ability to be a student, receive information, and then share it you can call it a teacher. And I just do not subscribe to being a doctor, this and that and so forth, because I feel like a lot of stuff is very supportive because I'm learning through this person, but at the same moment, they're learning from me because of learning, looking at things from a different perspective. There's no judgment there because she has studied these things when it comes to psychology, but she also brought to my attention, because I mentioned PTSD. She was like, well, you know, there's a difference between PTSD and complex PTSD. And this is where I'm going to dive into deeper about a lot of people have grown up that have dealt with, she said, PTSD can be an experience to where something happened like one time and people live with that, you know, relive it out, as it says. Like a single trauma, yeah, like one thing, like someone who experienced some type of war, or someone who experienced a sexual trauma and so forth, and they relive it out. There's a pattern there. And I was like, oh, but then she broke down complex PTSD. I said, you mother, I don't went through all this shit. Da, da, da. And it's funny because I'm making fun of the situation, but at the same time, I'm realizing what I've experienced, like repetitively. And what it does, it brings up the fact of what I've experienced and what I've put other people through unknowingly. So the complex PTSD talks about not just repeated trauma, she was saying, but relationship problems, it says, emotional regulations, feeling worthless, intimacy problems, feeling guilty and anger. Now, before I dive in deeper into that, I want y'all to really look at what people have built their foundations upon and really dive a little deeper, because again, going from the psychological warfare of personally dealing with people who don't look like me, right? And really seeing how, I'm going to use the term narrow-minded or closed-minded they are. And what I'm recognizing is that a lot of them have dealt with, when I look at violence from someone, because it talks about it here, when I look at violence, and when it talks about key symptoms of complex PTSD, emotional dysregulation consists of explosive anger. Now, how many of you know of people like that? Have dealt with a father? This shit has happened in so many cultures and creeds. Now, persistent sadness or chronic depression, suicidal thoughts, negative concept, feeling of worthiness, intense shame and guilt, and feeling damaged. Interpersonal dysfunction, extreme difficulty maintaining relationships, isolating from others, or distrusting people. Distrusting people. Now, let me tell you, I have a lot of us, when you're talking about, hold on one moment. Okay, so I had to reposition myself. Okay. I think I left off at interpersonal, which makes a lot of sense. Personal dysfunction, interpersonal dysfunction, extreme difficulty maintaining relationships, isolating from others, or distrusting people. Now, when I'm looking at complex PTSD on a grander scale, but also first looking at the fact of when I look at when people say white supremacy, that is a big one that sticks out. Because when I look at disassociating, feeling detached from one's body, mind, or having memory gaps, then we're talking about the fact of chronic fatigue, pain, migraines, and dizziness. That's physical symptoms, and behavior changes, self-destructive behaviors such as alcohol or drug misuse. We are forgetting that when you look at baby boomers or when you look at warlike consciousness, these are the things that come up. When you talk about interpersonal dysfunction, extreme difficulty maintaining relationships, now this can happen for a lot of people. It's happened for me personally, because if I don't have empathy for myself or emotional empathy, then there's going to be a high chance that I don't know how to maintain relationships with myself or other people. Now, I've told y'all about how emotional empathy consists of the fact of having empathy and feeling for someone and then finding a solution to try to better that situation or have a better outcome. And that reason why I say, if you have grown up in situations or have built structures or infrastructures and companies around self-hatred, nothing that supports empathy, then what ends up happening is that in that building, people lose sight of the empathy, and the communities that they built, they didn't build it on empathy. They didn't build it on having feelings and caring for other people. They built the structures upon just focusing on them and them alone. In that process, what it highlights is that's why there's no mutual trust, meaning there's a distrusting of people. And then for people to have developed such self-hatred for self or other people, to not get along and so forth, and then literally build communities, infrastructures, and so forth upon that, then who do you really blame? If there's no acknowledgement of self, if there's no accountability when you're projecting to the world, or what has been to projected to the world, that white is just right. And this is not all people. I'm breaking it down so you can really see what the learned behavior patterns for a lot of people have been and what they live in. Even in people who, again, when you're talking about cognitive oh my God, this word, cognitive dissonance, whatever, or conflict avoidance, another thing, then there is no resolution. So what ends up happening is that when you avoid why people have a distrust with you, it begins to show. Then you also disassociate, which again, for people who have elders and so forth that have disassociated themselves from their mind, the memories of that. Because when you're talking about dealing with PTSD in itself, I'm seeing it how it shows up so much in a lot of elders that have experienced warlike things. When you're talking about PTSD or being part of wars, when you're talking about having to deal with memory loss or memory gaps. Again, a lot of this disassociation or a lot of this emotional dysregulation has caused the reactiveness to be what it is in society. Going to the deeper aspect of why people react the way they do. We ask ourselves, well, not everyone that's darker has been through those deep traumatic experiences, but we're told to believe, why is it that we believe that it just happened from a certain people? That immediately creates distrusting relationships, but we're forgetting about people in other cultures and creeds from generations that have also been a part of exile or being exiled, or also being a part of traumatic experiences where they've had to live with it. People that have migrated to America, to where you have people that are darker who also ancestrally that have been through things that they never sat with, that in their bodies right now, when you're talking about chronic fatigue, pain, migraines, a lot of these things are associated with memory, what has been kept and stored in the body. When you have a narrative push that white is right in all aspects, then what you have is that you will have the opposite of that. People are darker shade, no matter who they are. Negative self-concept is developed, feeling of worthlessness, intense shame about how they should be themselves, guilt around even trying to be who they are, feeling damaged, almost like damaged goods, not feeling enough. Low self-esteem has a lot to do with negative concept. And when we're pushed, and I was telling the therapist, I was like, I realized that the butting heads, or what has come to a hedge when it comes to the fact of this concept around how people that are darker should believe, this negative or distasteful self-concept that they have had to develop even when they didn't want to. The narrative that's pushed, whether that be through sports, whether that be through entertainment, on all levels. Because when you're immediately giving a slave narrative, or when you immediately given these narratives that you are worthless, that you are devalued or dehumanized in every shape and form, that plays a major part in programming your subconscious mind. When pieces are left out that other generations of people that have also dealt with being captive, people in other countries that people don't research or learn or even interact with people because the distrust, the interpersonal dysfunction is so deep in humanity to where people don't want to manage and stabilize relationships. So they isolate and build communities and have built societies, communities, covens, groups that literally upholds this identity around dysfunctionality when it comes to their interpersonal dialogue. What else? This is why they don't even know why they're so distrusting of darker people. It's a narrative that has been created. It's a narrative. So what you end up having is that everything that you built as a person that's lighter, and I don't mean just in America, I know people in other countries that have built, and I'm talking about so many different countries that for one, a lot of different places where they isolate themselves from experiencing darker people. Interesting. And with this disassociation, you have a person that comes along speaking about one mind, one body, one soul, the collective, the oneness of things. There's this immediately memory gap or forgetfulness of how a lot of what they built would not have been built without the support of darker people. Same with people that are darker. A lot of shit that y'all see is about it. There's people. I can look at myself. There's certain things that I couldn't have built without support, without experiencing, I couldn't have built this platform or certain things if someone else that probably don't look like me did not build it. Or I wouldn't be able to talk about these situations, especially when you talk about interracial or dynamics, had I not met a person who did not look like me, who most likely, I actually brained these topics to her to now recognize why you disassociate, why there's a disassociation, why there's so much of I've said before, there's no mutual trust between darker and lighter people, depending on the environment. And the reason being, again, why there's distrust is because when I look at the depths of it, I have to recognize the learned behavior patterns of why people that look like you do not know how to have a difficulty maintaining relationships with darker people. That doesn't mean it's all about them, because that's the scapegoat. So many people I recognize that are of lighter shade, they want to call themselves, white, or go or hide behind that. A lot of their identity is literally built around scapegoating through indigenous people. Because when you look at the fact of the symptoms around what they believe and what they ignore, is a part of them wanting to reestablish or their inability to avoid, as it says, avoidance reminders of trauma, feelings, thoughts, and peoples and places. That's been the biggest thing of conflict avoidance, I've always said. I realized in this connection, with the mother of my children, it brought up the very things that could not be ignored when you're talking about systematic or systemic racism structures. I don't care who you are, who you date. If you're in something as such or have children like that, there's an underlining. There is an internal thing. And what needs to be highlighted, or what will come up, is the fact of how much, if these topics are not talked about, how much they will continue to be repressed and suppressed through your children. And, whether that mother speaks about it or acknowledges, and or father, they will continue to loop through it as a darker man, whether you're the darker person, whoever in a relationship. What has happened with people that are lighter, they will continue to loop through the trauma. And what they think is healthy by dissociating or detaching themselves or removing themselves entirely from not and then continue to try to build without people that are darker, what end up happening, not only will they continue to loop through the trauma, but it'll keep getting louder. It was something else I wanted to say. What they'll ignore is that they'll ignore that this is trying to bring you deeper to yourself, to bring you a sense of peace. But being that people have this inner, what I realized in creating this internal image or identity around you believing someone is worthless because of their skin color, or you feeling that they're worthless because of not just what they look like, but what they've experienced and their demographics, reflects you. I didn't say you are that. I said it reflects you. Because in your feeling and how you feel about that reflects you. Because guess what you develop? You develop an identity around that. You develop not only an inner identity, but you build upon that through your actions. Then also you create a belief system around it. Because all what we're dealing here, what is collapsing, is the fact of how people have allowed their emotions and to fuel their behavior, especially if they're not emotionally stable. That's going to highlight the fact of why people, when you're dealing with complex PTSD, repeat traumas. And more so, a lot of what I've noticed, military men, or especially men that are Caucasian, they have, not only through their avoidance, but they relive a lot of nightmares, it says, unwanted memories and flashbacks. How the fuck do you not live with that? And so this is why naturally what ends up happening, they go through dementia. And there's something that's not connecting, because in their inability to not connect and feel and want to acknowledge that, it pretty much shuts down the brain or shuts down the body. Through that chronic fatigue, physical symptoms show up, pain, migraines, and through the fact of behavior changes, self-destructive behaviors through their violent behavior. And I notice a whole lot of why, when you see, how things were introduced when it comes to slaughtering or, removal of indigenous people, a lot of people don't realize alcohol was a part of that. Drugs, the misuse or abuse of that. So in that trying to escape through that, to disassociate or disconnect from feeling, which you see a lot of men patriarchally lead with, they lead with numbness. They lead with overextending sexually or hypersexualizing to, and literally have created a self-image or self-concept around all of this. That's what you see playing out. And what they have convinced people to believe, and or a lot of people, whatever shade you are, to follow the lead. You're following people right along, and you're carrying the same fucking PTSD behavior, basically dysregulation within your body. And you're mimicking right after an image of what type of person, an individual, which is only going to lead you down a path of self-destruction, destroying everything in your path. So I go to a deeper aspect of, again, when you psychologically have been fucked to believe white is right, black or dark is wrong or evil, that will have people believing, because they disassociated from so much. And when you have women that are of lighter shade, or, whether you want to classify themselves as white, whatever it is, Caucasian, what ends up happening is that through their disassociation, through their developing, and what you see why so many women are hyper, uh, they don't want to be hypersexualized, but due to the fact that they want to feel a sense of belonging with their husbands or in the world, they offer themselves as a sacrifice just for that because they feel that they're just worthy of that. That's why you see so much of, them being sexualized through porn, through a whole bunch of other stuff. And look who follow them. Not all, but look who follows them and wants to be like them. That's a collective dis-ease, discomfort. That's why you see some women that are darker, they only feel from a sense of their internal worth, from a sense of their, again, negative concept of who they are because of what has been pushed to them to believe and what to accept. And in this internal dialogue, or in this internal belief system that they have, their inability to know their worth, they have feelings of feeling worthless, or shame or guilt around even to show up how they are. So they mimic another woman because that's how they feel that they're going to be accepted or embraced and so forth. Same thing with men. A lot of the structures in place, a lot of them, their inability to feel worthy. I see a lot of men, whether dark or lighter, they don't know how to, their disassociation as well, or their disconnect with their emotions. They unconsciously look for acceptance or validation. That's why they dim their light, or they be a part of corporations associated with things, sports, music, and so forth, that truly doesn't allow them to walk in their fullness. So they dim them. They allow their light to be dimmed instead of to step outside in their own individualism or authenticity and integrity, and go through the different emotions and go through the different things to actually build their own character, through their own character develop. And that's where you see like a lot of motherfuckers sell out, or that's why you see a lot of people don't know how to be themselves, or they'll be in a place where behind the scenes a man that don't look like them, and they'll play their fucking game, or they'll play small, or they'll feel like, again, it reflects their internal fucking shit, and feel like they gotta do these things ritualistically, whatever, to the depths. I ain't going that deep. Feel like they gotta do this just to belong or fit in. So again, when you have what I see in the distorted patriarchal, I see all these things. I see the fact of how the world loves enabling people who emotional dysregulation. They fuel, now that it's collapsing, they love when men, when you look at, some may call it like when you see the collapse of the empire of Rome Empire, or the collapse of the old narrative, look at the combativeness and fighting. Explosive anger fuels that. Unstable emotions fuel that. Seeing people get their, fighting, a gladiator type shit. Persistent sadness. I guarantee a lot of those men, they go home, what they try to escape through is a lot of drugs or a lot of stuff. They experience a lot of things to where, being that they're looked at in this animalistic, so much, they gave in this false perception of power. They want to take all this and put it into their athletics or this and that. Never dealing with the emotions, right? So now you got, from this emotional dysregulation, now you have chronic depression. You don't even know why you're feeling like this. Now you got some people dealing with unaliving thoughts. Don't know why. Worthy. Don't feel worthy or belonging. That's what mental health comes in, mental disorder. When you don't, and I'm glad what's next is negative, not so much bad or negative, because negative, I tell y'all, it's like, I look at negative as negative and positive. Negative is like I can see it's like, I would say, an unhealthy self-concept instead of a negative. Because if I said negative in there, I'm reminding you that it's an unhealthy attachment to self-development, self-concept, how you perceive yourself. So that unhealthy aspect of that, when you're dealing with kids or people in certain environments and so forth, that has been fueled through media and so forth, that has been given a mindset to believe that you're worthless if you're not playing sports. You're worthless if you're not a part of this. You're worthless if you're not a part of this community, whether spiritually, this and that. Because this person is worthy. This person, and you don't even know their hands are not clean. Their heart is not clean. They offer you something, but they coming from a place of not even feeling worthy. They doing it from superficial and money and other shit, and that don't even really truly that's where their worth lies in. But there's no substance. There's no depth to that. Because anyone can have money, but they're not rich in spirit. So now here they are bringing you and offering you something that's not deep, something that doesn't have substance. So now here it is, you're going to see it come out eventually a lot, how shameful people feel and guilt around being a part of association and corporations and stuff, because it's going to highlight mental health awareness. It's going to highlight a lot of things that people have kept in. So now going down to, again, once y'all realize that a lot of these men, what y'all call leaders and certain people in these positions, reflect most of this shit I just called out. You can see it in their behavior. They can't hide it. Y'all don't realize this transit just happened, the Neptune in Pisces just transitioned to Neptune in Aries. So it's that went from the emotional waters, the subconscious, the dream state. That went from the feminine that cannot, everything happens in, the feminine aspect. That means how people view femininity. That's why they put negative on stuff and not seeing from a place of, when I see negative, that's a feminine archetype being described. Negative, positive. So with that, it's going to highlight that which needs to be purged. And that's it's going to highlight people's values. What I'm reading is what the world saw as value. Feeding and fueling and enabling people who were fucked up. Pushing a narrative, especially to indigenous people, that everything dark, whether that's on spiritual, physical, even if you look a certain way externally, again, we're going to push a narrative of an unhealthy concept to your ass. So what ends up happening is that this is where you have, this is why I was telling the therapist, I said, when you have this push that white is right, then what ends up happening is that they'll develop a self-concept that everything they do is right and never wrong. So now they grow up, and then through that counter, or how it shows up, how things are balanced, you have kids growing up to where they can say and project and get away with what they've developed through their self-concept of their mother and father, what's been passed to them. So now they don't know that there's going to be consequences to now things being rebalanced, to where you're going to see people not going for that shit. You're going to see people push back because this is a balance right now. So when you speak about a civil war, when you think about stuff, there's a spiritual aspect to that shit. That means people pushing back. They're not going for certain things. Because in a shift in power comes a rise of a new power. And this is where conflicts, how is this resolution going to be this time? Some people might not want to be through peace. And sometimes through peace, there comes war. And most of the time where war is, that it starts with a war inside of someone. What are they warring with? So now, here it is to where you've been telling me I'm worthless this whole time. Now I'm realizing all the things that you built your shit upon was basically trying to scapegoat or siphon through my inability to feel worthy. Now that I clocked your T, as someone say, or I clocked it, I realized Your money it doesn't mean shit. It's valuable, but the way you view it says a lot about your value system. So why would I try to be anything like you when I know you hate yourself? When I know that you built mostly what you created from a place of an unhealthy attachment to the idea of other people or how you perceive the feminine archetype. So how you built what you built comes from a feminine place. How you built your constructs, how you built shit comes from an unhealthy lens of women and children. That says a lot about not only you, that says a lot about your internal world. And what I realized, the solution for that is not me having anything to do with you, but revoking access. Because I realize you are not only a disease, but you are a virus. You want to corrupt me, but you can no longer do that because I realize in your corruption is only going to cause your self-demise. You're only going to self-destruct eventually. That's why you have these behavior patterns of self-destructive behaviors. And then in your inability to face who you are as a man and what you build, now when certain things isn't accessible for you to build upon, now you have to escape through that which, when you don't have access to this, you have to escape through maybe alcohol and drugs. The same thing you kind of try to do to other people eventually comes back full fucking circle. Now when the tables have turned, how are you going to find a solution? Not only for you, but for your sons, but for your kids' kids. Because if everything you try to plant seeds and build your corporation and business upon, because you love when people support it and we're escaping through their chronic illnesses and depression. You love that we had a negative or unhealthy concept off of who we are, from who we are internally, because you know that a lot of you, it was very clever. Because you knew this was just as spiritual as it was physical. Because they want to make you think it's just physical. But now I realize, who taught you that though? So it's funny how in learning the game, you realize that some people get a little greedy because they forget who the fuck taught them. They forget that they're not bigger than they're not bigger than the program. There's always someone that came along and shared something with someone. And what you're going to see end up happening is that in people siding with people, and people wanting the certain things that happen to people, their demise, praying on their demise. You know how many people spiritually were praying on the demise of certain people, hoping that they never developed a healthy, let's counter it, a healthy emotional regulation, a healthy self-concept, a healthy interpersonal, or that they develop an interpersonal, they function interpersonally in a healthy way. Meaning that in the interpersonal dysfunction, they learn to interpersonally develop healthy relationship with themselves. Then they don't isolate. They balance between solitude and then with others. Then they realize that in not trusting other people, because that reflects the fact of, do I trust myself? So I trust people to be them. Because then I'm able to, not only in the rehabilitating my relationship, now I have the power to rehabilitate the world and other people. Now when I start to recognize why I was disassociating myself or feeling detached from my own self and not wanting to feel a sense of feeling belonging within myself, I start to recognize I become, in that detaching from my body, my mind, and the memories, I start to realize, oh shit, it's natural to associate with my body, with my mind, with my spirit, with my memories, because that's a part of the human experience. Then, as this comes up and I regulate through it, I realize my physical symptoms start to change. No more chronic fatigue, no more migraines, no more, it says, dizziness. And I also realize that in shifting, my behavior changes. I start to realize that as I prioritize my wellness and not focus on the men who literally try to create businesses and foundations off of that, I began to realize that my self-destructive behaviors were affecting not only me, but where they stemmed from and how it affected other people. So I no longer try to escape through alcohol, corn, or the misuse of drugs. Isn't it interesting? Because I realize most of these men most likely dealt with this. Because it ain't just me. I start to realize, I look at these men that have built these structures, that were placed in these positions. Why complex PTSD develops, the causes, results of prolonged repeated traumas rather than a single event. Most of them have grew up in very abusive households repetitively. They dealt with neglect and abandonment. Because see, it was told to us as darker people, indigenous people, not all of you, but in the Americas per se, the narrative in the media that especially darker men aren't actually in the homes or have, and it's funny how we are more a part of our children's life, but supposedly are the most incarcerated. Dang. Now, when it says long-term domestic violence or intimate partner abuse, I also researched this. You can do this too. We don't have the most statistics around that. It's not as portrayed to the media, where the media would say or push that narrative. But I realized that it also mentioned human trafficking and sexual slavery or torture. Wow. Now, when I look at a business, how corn was created, and I'm not saying people are slaves, but when I realize how most of those people most likely have dealt with some type of trauma. And then when I look at how much money it has accumulated, and when I look at the foundations of the men who are behind it and who are addicted to it, says a lot about that. When I look at the fact of being held captive, of living in war zones, now when I look at living in war zones, that can definitely remind me of people who were part of war, but also people with certain demographics. Because we want to think they're going across the country, going somewhere else, when you can have people who have these warlike tendencies or never dealt with their complex PTSD or even dealt with their PTSD, they can pretty much hold on to a lot of these things I'm talking about. Because when you talk about impulsiveness and self-destructive behavior, who don't want to have nothing constructive and want to destroy or want to, build or want to police, I should say, in such a controlling and self-destructive way. Says a lot about even prison systems, like being held captive. I do see that as a form of imprisonment. Some people will argue me up and down, argue with your mama, to where if you think it's normal for people to be held captive or imprisoned for such a duration, to prove what? So now that these tables are turning and things are collapsing, because we know who owns those prisons, and we know that, Yeah. Do your research. So now that their reign of terror is over, I'm starting to realize that cognitive behavior therapy. You might want to research that. Self care, establishing safe environments and supportive networks is crucial. I would definitely encourage that. That's something I've had to learn because I realize in all different cultures, in what has been inflicted, we also, as men, especially darker men, have to now have the courage to build self care routines to heal from men that don't look like me, to heal from women that don't look like me, to heal from the environments that were not supportive of one's emotions, mental clarity, or mental state, spiritually, and so forth. Even a country, environments. So, with that, I have to look into this. It says the eye movement, am I reading that correctly? Desensitization and reprocessing or common treatment. I think that's where they do this or something like that. Interesting. Don't laugh at me when you see this, but so getting back to the point of if you are psychologically brought up that white is right, I'm going to bust a lot of you bubbles. Then when you look at on all levels of what the powers that used to be pushed, and this is not about superiority, you got to realize this is balance being restored and such the fact of feminine archetype being honored, respected, and embraced. Because that's what a lot of this stems from. When I look at a lot of these things highlight the fact of disassociation, physical symptoms, behavior changes. A lot of these things stem from how the femininity has been viewed, how it's been distorted. The distorted mothers behind these very men. It's just as much as a Caucasian or white man, whatever you want to say, is accountable for his actions, their mothers are too. Let me tell you again, women, y'all got to realize that I don't care what you built. I don't care the communities that you have. I don't care how fast your car goes. This also goes for women in other countries. Whether you're Siberian, Russian, whatever it is you are. Love. You are a part of the collective. You are a part of this. You know that your parents or caregivers have a distrusting relationship with people that are darker. As much as you don't want to say that you are affected by this, how do you think different shades of people come into this world? Now, going to the origins of things, yes, a darker woman can create different shades. But naturally, through eons, through generations, there are people who associate themselves with people. And it's not subscribed as interracial. There are darker people that are Indian in India. There are darker people in different shades and so forth. That's just the natural thing. But what I'm getting at is this. That says a lot for your mothers and fathers to not have a healthy relationship with darker people. That says a lot for people in different countries who are lighter, are part of the same culture or nationality, who have an issue with darker people. That says a lot for people who bleach their skin. That says a lot of reflecting worthiness. As much as people want to disassociate themselves, because disassociation will make you feel like, you're not connected to, for one, your body and your mind and so forth. That reflects self-hatred. That also reflects the fact of how you have developed or been programmed to develop an unhealthy concept, self-concept, internal concept of how you should be, self-expression. Because when you were a child, you didn't care nothing. You didn't know none of this shit. So now, A lot of you, the world's going to see is reflection. Most of what you built and created is collapsing because how can you expect things to continue as they are with no honor and respect of the feminine archetype? The indigenous women that reflect those feminine archetypes in a healthy way. Not through distortion. See, your distortion is how you have supported and enabled the men that don't look, that your fathers, let's call it out, your fathers, to have a distrusting, you supported for them to have a distrusting relationship for so long. But yet, in that, you still sometimes want to be like them. And it's the same for people that are darker. In your inability to feel worthy, you care too much about, this is how some business, whether makeup brands and all this other stuff, fashion and all like that, all of that shit reflects the fact of why you buy it, why you do these things. And you're surprised when the brands or stuff that have been created that has pretty much stolen, without shame or guilt, symbols or copied or mimicked you. They literally built stuff from people, mimicked them, and then in your ability, when they come out and tell you how they don't care about people that are dark or whatever it is, your inability to feel worthy, you don't know how to disconnect or detach yourself from, because you built an identity around it so long, to disconnect from supporting. Because y'all don't realize that's what the trauma bond is with a lot of these corporations and business and so forth that's collapsing. We're no longer in a trauma bonding. We're elevating from trauma bonding. Low frequency, low vibrations. A lot of that stuff was trauma bonding. A lot of you have trauma bonds with your father. It doesn't matter how much you go out there and portray to be nice. You have an internal image of believing that people that are darker are ugly or nasty or less valuable than you. And how long you thought that was going to go on, my dear? Homeboy, Todd, Jacob, people, whomever, whatever you built your shit upon. You literally built your family compounds, your communities, your covens, your spiritual communities, all around dissociation. Not just dissociation, what else here? You literally built it around cognitive distances. You literally built it around someone else's trauma to make you feel a sense of worthiness. And truth is, you feel worthless without it because you don't have your own identity. And now you followed all of these people, all of these men, no matter their status, creed, well, you follow a lot of these men right into their demise. They dug a ditch, and they're trying to dig a ditch for somebody else. They dug a ditch for your ass too. Now, this is why a lot of you, through your, puffing your lips up, trying to look like something that you hate. Ain't that something? Trying to mimic something without even developing your own identity says a lot about you loving yourself. Sounds like a lot of secret admirers. And also, it's funny how when you grow up in a world where, again, that speaks about how trying to teach people that white is rights, psychological warfare, that again, it shows the fact of You don't want to be held accountable. You don't want people that are darker telling you, hey, this is how you treated me. I don't like it. And then now when the tables have turned, what's the saying goes, people don't forget how you make them feel. You want people to go through, in their healing, you want them to go through the same cycles of what? Complex PTSD like you did and your father and mother did. They wanted you to forget about what they've done to people, how they treated people, how they just wanted to associate with people just like you. Just like, and in that, they literally built a fucking identity around that. How do you feel? You've been bamboozled too, love. We all have. So now this teaches people that are lighter, and this happens even with people that are so-called, I'll use the term black, which y'all call it. Women, not all of them, that are lighter skinned, they'll feel superior to darker women. Don't realize, again, coming from a deep insecurity. They don't even realize what they was programmed to believe. And then some of them I've seen, they'll get in positions where they'll get higher up in a certain position. They'll give their bodies over, because a lot of women don't talk about this, but due to a lot of people wanting to build some type of structure, in the fact that a lot of these men have built it all from these very places of feeling worthless, they had to build it on something. In their viewpoint of how they view the feminine archetype, and then they're reflecting women, how they view in their relationships with their mothers, they built it off that. And they enabled it. And they supported it. And niggas did too. Darker people did too. They do it all the time. They go through humiliation all the time. And the reason why you hear a lot about humiliation rituals, it has a lot to do with the fact of everything you do is a ritual. So you humiliating yourself to what? To feel a sense of belonging and value. That's the humiliation ritual. Because they threaten you with what? Well, you won't get any money, or we won't do this, or we won't do that. Y'all don't give it so much power to motherfuckers that physically look like something, when your power has always been spiritual currency. And once you realize that, you realize they come in all shapes and forms, and what I mean by that is like colors. They come in all colors to try to deceive you, manipulate you, offer you with this, offer you with that, offer you with money, offer you with certain things to convince you that of your worth, of your feminine archetype, infinite worth, like your worth. That means no amount of money, no amount of nothing. What did you do to receive it? You'll be a part of something, and then you come to the realization. Because I know these motherfuckers' hands not clean, and their heart not clean. So now you don't humiliate yourself. Not only you humiliate your fucking ancestors. You want to talk about a humiliation ritual. You humiliated your ancestors that were striving to thrive, to come out of survival. You know the survival they had to go through? And you want to sit here knowing that you got to sit with that shame and guilt around the decisions. That's what disgusts me about you niggas. You house niggas in sports, in all type, whatever colors and creeds. You got folks that's trying to convince you of how much you're worth. You humiliate yourself. Just to what? You feel a sense of belonging, nigga? Because you don't know your internal worth. I'm speaking from learning discipline and emotional stability and security. The divine father, the discipline, the divine mother to remind me of navigating through these emotions where I feel anger and rage. Fuck, man. Y'all sit here following after motherfuckers who don't feel worthy. And they build from your feeling worthless. And you call that character and integrity? And that goes for all creeds and colors, but especially you niggas I know. So again, if the world is trying to convince you that people that don't look like you, they're a lighter, is right in everything they do, you know what their fear is? Or you know what, yeah, not only their fear is, they never want to be held accountable. Then it should say a lot to where how they react when they are held accountable because they fucking father didn't hold them accountable. A lot of these men that you don't realize, they may have built stuff, but a lot of them didn't come from men with integrity and authenticity, or at least empathy. So now you don't went and sided with someone. Well, I'm gonna use the term, and I don't mean this in a negative or bad thing. You sided with the devil, now the devil gonna come collect. And y'all don't realize all of these structures that was built on that energy, the devil gonna collect as in the divine mother steps in to reconstruct and dismantle everything that's not built upon authenticity and integrity. Abuse of power. So I use that devil term in a sense of how spirit comes to collect. So, and when you have that narrative push, and guess what darker people believe? Everything that they do is wrong because they've been told they've been wrong, and no, they've been wrong. It's wrong that what you do. Don't speak up. You know, don't do this, don't that. All that fear shit. Because you don't realize the duality of that. They not even the duality. They built their shit on fear. No matter what you do, there's fear and there's love in all things. The fear is naturally going to come up of the unknown. Then you got to navigate through it with love, with integrity. Because then you realize on the other side of fear is love. It's the beauty of, you realize on the other side of fear was an illusion. So a lot of y'all don't bought into this narrative of believing the elite, the people. Why y'all literally got psychologically people in y'all fucking head that automatically looks nothing like you. And you support that more than motherfuckers who look like you. That's what creates distrust in yourself. You don't trust yourself. There is trust amongst people that are darker. There is. But being that you have dealt with long-term shit, dealing with people that like violence and abuse and so forth, I dealt with it. You see your mother go through long-term abuse and so forth, that builds distrust not only within yourself, but amongst men that look like you. Subconsciously. And so now you think you passed that, and now into adulthood, you're realizing how much you don't like and don't trust men. Same thing for men. It happened with me. Going through so much with women, it didn't look like me, would have me believing that all women that look like that, I couldn't trust. All women, and then I experienced other things with women, it doesn't make it better. When you have women, as you learn, who, I'm just using the term white or Caucasian, who mask themselves, but have been enabled and supported by men who are so disassociated, who also have developed this unhealthy concept or internal dialogue with women that don't look like them, that's darker, and men. So guess what? Now, and what they built from their father, now, as soon as you come into a connection, boom. All this karmic energy, all these things unresolved within that mother or father and so forth, or whomever it is, has to either be faced or resolved within self and in that individual to see how can you live amongst each other? How can you have something stable or balanced? How? And that's why relationships and certain things are so vital. That's why a lot of kids that are interracial, if you don't know, deal with things ancestrally. That's where a lot of pent up anger and repressed things come from. because of overall unresolved things between those different, whether nationalities, creeds, generational things and so forth. That's why. Because, and then it's even more deeper because people that are darker, again, they've been told so long by other people, not just people that look like them, not to do something. You wrong when you young. Because, and then the media pushing that anything you try to do is wrong if you don't do it this way. So they don't see nothing right. And I don't mean just right in a good way. I mean, they don't find the best solution. They'll do what's familiar and then believe more into a solution and what's right about being white as the best solution for them. Let me go get some tissue. Ain't that some shit? And it's funny I say that is because I had to get to a place where I've experienced realizing why it bothered. Think about this, how it bothers so many people. And this reflects, again, their internal world or their self-concept of people that are darker. I've witnessed people that are lighter who will want to support what I'm doing. But in the collective aspect, the reason being why you see a lot of them have sympathy, meaning they'll have compassion from a distance. But the thing they lack, again, from dealing with fathers who have raised them and groomed them. Because you got to think about this, a child is innocent. A mother as well. That, again, not all people that are lighter shade in this country or in environments have, a lot of them didn't know things. This is where grace comes in, because I've had people tell me that. A lot of them did not know. A lot of their fathers, a lot of some people fathers, you got people never been in that realm of realizing how systematically self-hatred or structural racism is. And in that, as it's highlighted now, you will realize how much has been brushed up under the rug from a country over hundreds of years that can no longer be ignored. Because in taking back your power, it's accepting and acknowledging your disassociation, your behavior patterns, your concept, self-image, and concept that a lot of women have built on just a beauty standard. Think about what the beauty standard is. Think about, for one, and then just outside of who it's supposed to be, but also the fact of how these are people who try to show up so much on surface that they ignore regulating their emotions. So this is why they don't have successful or know how to maintain relationships, because they don't have a fucking healthy one with themselves. So when you have realizing that the only thing a lot of people can do is trauma bond, it makes sense why they won't support you, especially trying to be healthy or holistic or learning how to regulate it. And that's for all people. But when I look at the collective aspect of what a certain image of people represent, they only know how to trauma bond. Trauma bond cannot, y'all just think trauma bond has a lot to do with just, we think abuse is just people dealing with physical or verbal. When you're dealing with a neglect and abandonment, that's a form of abuse. So now when you're talking about the fact of how people have went to war or left their mothers, these men have left their mothers, created third parties or stepped out and cheat on their women a lot, or do certain things that reflects the unhealthy attachment that they have to the feminine or the distorted way of being, y'all ignoring the fact of This is what type of men you want to model after? This is what type of men that y'all been enabling? Fuck out of here. Because abandonment is a form of abuse. When you purposely, intentionally abandon a child, neglect them. And so this is why they disassociate and they don't know how to have healthy relationships with themselves and or darker people. We want to make it seem like men that are lighter or what you see in the world. You got to realize they escape not just through drugs and stuff like that. They try to escape through their careers and money. It's another form of abandonment, abuse of self, abuse of power that you were given to balance. Y'all got it so fucking fucked up and twisted. And so now that you see how people, again, it's challenging for a woman who don't look like me, who has to face and resolve the shit her mother and her father did. And this is where you see people that are sometimes darker, who overextend and people please with trying to feel like they belong in certain settings, and you don't. Not all, but they know what I'm talking about. And so now you got people more focused on themselves because the power is shifted, especially with darker people, because it doesn't surprise us what's happening when it comes to certain people doing certain shit. So it's very important to maintain a healthy relationship with yourself and what we're doing to try to associate ourselves with people who don't care to have a healthy relationship with themselves, which reflects the fact of it's very challenging and difficult for them to have a relationship with me. That makes all the sense. So let me seclude myself and protect what I'm doing and let them continue to isolate themselves. And I realized, oh shit, you've been trying to make it seem like it's me being the problem. Now you can no longer scapegoat to me. What image are you going to use now? What are you going to dig up now? What are you going to try to use as blackmail now? Nothing. Because there's nothing. Those manipulative tactics, those deceptions and all that, there's nothing. Because I revoked your access. And that goes for a lot of people. You just want access to what? To do what? I'm good. I'm straight. So now, I realized like even people oddly obsession to people, because when you're dealing with envy, because jealousy is wanting what someone has. I get that. But envy is going deeper to where you're trying to destroy. But now I start to realize the count of that is even trying to destroy so much of what people do because you envy, which reflects the within yourself. You're only going to destroy yourself. That's all you do. That just really reflects the self-destructive behavior patterns. So, I always remind y'all don't realize like in these moments, y'all going to see highlighted how much people have held in and how much a lot of you have been killed from the joys of life or experiencing life amongst other people. Y'all don't realize how psychological fucked y'all have been, no matter what color and creed you are. Through religion as well, because if white is right, there's a reason why they give you an image of a man. Even how it's psychologically that fucked you over as a woman. Women that are lighter. Let's go down that road though. It's so funny how the men that you know that you don't want to be with, or you know that how you've been treated, and all of a sudden he tells you that this religious figure is going to make it right or go to him. It sounds like a mind fuck to me. It sounds a lot like narcissism, how a lot of religious figures have been used for control and manipulation, and to also see, place in a place of superiority. Interesting. And so I've studied the behavior, just like, people study us. But I study the behaviors. When you sit back and realize, like, to be very strict, like, honest about it is, or authentic about it. My interactions with men that are white or Caucasian or whatever, not all of them, but most, in the collective aspect of what the distorted father is, there's not one that I will want to even emulate or mimic. There's not one. And the reason being is, like, they could, great people, they could be nice. Not all of them that I've dealt with are abusive, or have been, violent towards me. But that's the catch. Is because when you ignore the climate of what has happened, it says a lot about your character development. It says a lot about what you are willing to guard and protect for not only your self-image, but your internal image, and then what you will keep going to protect the image externally of and internally, which again, in protecting your self-image, it reflects your internal image of what you continue to want to build amongst your generation. So in the fact of how people have kept these things structured, in the collapse of this, it's not about, I told you, it's not about superiority. It's about your turn to heal now. It's about your turn to see yourself. You have the opportunity just as well as I do. You have the opportunity to be enlightened just as well as I do. Because what you want to ignore, you could no longer ignore, is the fact of, that it's collapsing. And a lot of people, when it talks about the emotional dysregulation, it's to point out facts. When you research why Caucasian men have the highest suicidal rate, it's concerning. I'm concerned. Some people will be, because of their emotions or in a way in their hearts or whatever it is, they will be like, yeah, whatever, fuck them, whatever it is. I'm not like that. I don't care. Because I've had men that I've associated with that have been supportive. That changed my judgment, but that doesn't mean I'm all in. In building things, it shows you again how what you've been exposed to young, I can kind of connect and relate because there's some similarities there. What I also realize is that, what's your reasoning why you act the way you act? And I see a deeper aspect to it. I see the spiritual, I see the emotional, I see the mental, and so forth. Because we want to overlook the fact that you wasn't the first one. I keep telling y'all there were people of darker shades that were also a part of the same behavior patterns and structures. I mean, it's happening right now. I know niggas all the time do the same stuff. And they build structures off of it. Womanizing, dehumanizing, devaluing, whether podcasts, whether through their business, through their relationships, through their on all levels. How they build their spiritual community. I mean, you see it all the time. Basically, like preying on the childhood wounds, or yeah, that's what happened. Until you realize that a darker man truly, like, outside of the color, really truly reflects what you have going on inside. And I'm saying this on a spiritual and metaphorical aspect, because everything in you too was birthed from the darkness. You too was birthed from a mother that when you was in the womb, it was dark. So your inability to associate things being darker and you develop this self-concept of believing that it's worthless, says a lot about your inability to connect to your emotions, to connect to the depths of who you are. Because beyond skin color, there's these that what's happening has a lot to do with what's internalized. And because people ancestry, people that are darker, have people of lighter shades that are their ancestors that came before them. Some people that are not all, but some people that are a lighter shade, depending on their nationality, or have people that are dark. There are people that came into your life that have associated with you and did not want to harm you, did not want to do anything against you. And again, your fears can come up to where you could have sympathy knowing what went on, but for a lot of you, you got so prideful and ego that where you didn't want to associate yourself again. This reflects your internal compass, your internal outlook. And a lot of your fears come up of, well, I actually want to be with them and connect with them on a deeper level, but your ego and I'm scared how my family's going to see me, and if, da da da. This has been a theme for so long. Because a lot of you know that a lot of your experiences with darker people have been even more amazing than people that's in your own fucking family. Same thing that goes for darker people too. We have our belief system too. I've come from some where they do not at all want to deal with people that are lighter, and that's okay because that doesn't disregard or what's the word I'm looking for? That doesn't make their experience less valuable. Like my grandmother and them, people have went through things where they are not trusting at all of people that don't look like them. I'm not mad at her for that because it's traumatic. That's where the PTSD comes from. Now imagine people that are darker experiencing complex PTSD from people that are lighter. When you talk about being abused, going to school, being rocks thrown at, neglect also is in a way of people not associating themselves with people that supported building this country, support your businesses and so forth. You neglect them, you abandon them in the time of in the time of crisis. Y'all don't realize, like y'all think this shit just starts with family. No, and then when you talk about long-term violence, what have people in this country have dealt with? Long-term violence from who? When you talk about, it says human trafficking or sexual slavery. When you look at the fact of how sports, how a lot of these shits is built, some people consider that as a form of trafficking. When you look at organ donor and a whole bunch of other shit, the shit cannot be ignored. Cannot be ignored. It will not be ignored. Again, prison systems, being held captive. What you're going to see is that a lot of what people have went through, they are going to experience. They're going to experience. It's just what it is. They're going to experience because we're all here to learn a lesson. And that doesn't mean everyone has to suffer, but you create your own suffering because of inability to where generationally you are called to shift the mindset. A lot of people are going to suffer and they have to go through a suffering for lessons. It's like you tell someone something like a child, they don't listen, then they gradually have to grow through that. And so this is how people elevate. This is how humanity will elevate collectively. When people laughed and, threw the stone and hit their hand when people were going through stuff, what makes you think you exempt? And I'm gonna tell people, a lot of people are very empathetic. But let me tell you this, like I told my therapist, I said, it's okay you missing someone or having empathy for someone, but emotional empathy is important for you not to lose your self identity, meaning that you have to have empathy for yourself, and you can feel what you feel. You can have empathy, but not to get in that pattern where you're used to overextending or trying to save someone from a fucking lesson that they need to go through. Because people fear is like, oh gosh, da 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 da. Well, how many times have we have seen people go through things where we realize that they have to learn through it? They brought it upon themselves. That's what this shift in power is all about. I'm not saying don't be supportive, but you can be supportive in however you see fit. But then when you go through something where you know you should have been mindful and not, then that's on you. There's some people I know right now that said so many things and did so many things. It's okay. But if the mind says be discerning and not be open and supportive and so forth, I'm going to fucking listen. Because if I'm called to realize that in this aspect of um, what has happened, and I'm being secluded or asked to be present and to focus on what I'm doing, I'm going to listen to my intuition, because learned behavior patterns have shown me, and this a dysregulated nervous system has shown me, like, do not put yourself back in that position again. So I realize a lot of what's happening right now is that before we say this person is causing us something, we have to recognize, we're recognizing that a lot of this distorted patriarchal is dealing with or have dealt with complex PTSD researching. And or some of us have dealt with PTSD. And that's on different aspects. Like I said, different parts of their life, they've experienced certain things. And this has affected everybody collectively. Everybody. You're not exempt. You're not exempt. And the new leadership on the rise and the shift will acknowledge that. Because there's no more running away from you, no matter who you are. So yeah, I feel like that's all I want to cover. So y'all take care of yourself. Peace and blessings. Shalom.